The moment you've been waiting for has arrived. You felt the weight of waiting, the doubts that haunted your thoughts, the fear that everything had been in vain. But now, before you, is the fulfillment of the promise. It was no coincidence that you got here. Every step, every tear, every silent prayer was seen. The time of uncertainty is over, because the one who promised is faithful to fulfill it. You looked around so many times, looking for signs, trying to understand if there was, still hope. There were days when your heart was filled with faith, but there were also nights when discouragement tried to erase everything you believed in. But listen carefully. I've always been here. I never stopped working behind the scenes in your life. Even when everything seemed still, I was moving pieces you couldn't see. Nothing got out of my control. The waiting time was not punishment, but preparation. I needed to strengthen your faith, shape your character, open the right paths so that when that day came, you would be ready to welcome it. And that day arrived. Don't be afraid to move forward. Don't hesitate to take a step forward. What you asked for so much is now before you. The enemy tried to make you believe that nothing would change, that promises were nothing more than words in the wind. But I am God, and when I speak, I deliver. I am not a man to lie, nor a son of man to promise and not fulfill. What I said I would do in your life has already started to happen. Every tear that fell in secret, every silent cry in the middle of the night was recorded in heaven. Nothing went unnoticed. What seemed distant is now materializing before your eyes. There are still those who don't believe. There are those who doubted you, who said you wouldn't make it, that it was all just an illusion. But I see beyond what human eyes see. I know your heart. I know the sincerity of your faith, your dedication. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your answer will be what I am placing in your hands now. The same ones who doubted, who expected to see his fall, will be witnesses of his victory. But before you take ownership of what I'm giving you, understand one thing. This promise is not just about you. It carries a much greater purpose. What I am releasing into your life is not limited to one moment. It is something that will mark generations. The impact of this goes beyond what you can imagine. Therefore, keep this word in your heart, because this is the beginning of something extraordinary. Comment: I believe that God is keeping his promise. As an act of faith. Witness with your own life that whoever hopes in God will never be disappointed. The time of promise has arrived. It's time to receive it. The waiting time was never in vain. You looked back, perhaps with some doubts, thinking that what seemed like a delay was just a mistake of fate. But everything that happened, every obstacle you faced, every closed door, and every discouragement you experienced was part of the divine process of preparation. God was not idly by during this time. He was working behind the scenes, preparing you to live out the promise at the right time. Many times you felt tired, maybe you even thought about giving up. But I saw every tear, every prayer, every silent resignation. You wondered if it was possible, if this day would ever come, but I was shaping your faith. I was lining up the details, removing people who didn't belong in your path, and closing doors that weren't for you. If anything was denied, it was to protect you, for I know the future, and my promise will always be greater than any limited vision you have. There were times when you felt alone, where it seemed like your strength was at an end. When you were at your limit, feeling incapable, remember that it was in this process of waiting that I made you stronger. Every day that you remained firm, even without seeing the immediate result, was building something in you that cannot be destroyed. It was the process that prepared the ground for the miracle, and that ground is now fertile for the harvest. You have often wondered about the purpose of all this suffering, but now you can see that each struggle was essential to the moment you are about to experience. Without the process, you would not be prepared for the magnitude of the blessing I am giving you now. Every sacrifice, every challenge, every step of faith has led you to this moment. God does not make empty promises. He fulfills what He says. What you experienced, every difficulty faced, every prayer, was seen by Him. I saw your nights of anguish. I saw your effort. I saw your persistent faith. And it is now, at this very moment, that what seemed impossible will become reality. But make no mistake, what you will experience is not just for you. This blessing has a much greater purpose than you might imagine. What God is releasing into your life is not for your own consumption, but for you to become a channel of blessing, so that your story of overcoming and faith inspires and strengthens others. The testimony of your victory will be a beacon of hope for those around you. Therefore, keep in your heart that God's purpose is always broader than what we can see with our limited eyes. You may look at your life and realize that you had to wait to understand what God was doing. But now, when you look back, you will realize that it was all part of the divine plan. The wait was not a mistake. It was not wasted time. The wait was preparation for a great moment, and that moment has arrived. If this word spoke to your heart, enjoy it now as an act of faith. Show the world that you believe that even in your struggles, God was preparing something extraordinary for your life. The time of waiting has turned into a time of harvest, and the promise is now yours. What seemed lost is now being restored. You looked at your life and thought that some paths had come to an end, that certain opportunities would never return. But listen carefully. Nothing has been lost. Everything was being prepared. God never forgot what He promised. Every silent prayer, every cry in the midst of pain, every night of anguish was recorded in heaven. Now harvest time has arrived, and the promise is being released upon your life. You asked yourself so many times if it was worth continuing to believe. God's silence seemed like a no, but it was just a hope. What He had for you was not small, and so it could not be given anyway. The waiting time was not punishment, it was construction. God was building something inside you. If the promise had come sooner, you might not have been ready to receive it. But now you are. Now, what seemed distant becomes reality before your eyes. Do you remember the nights when your soul cried without anyone seeing? From the days when you carried an invisible weight in your heart without the strength to continue? I was there. I saw every moment of pain, every sacrifice you made without recognition, every renunciation that no one noticed. I was preparing for something bigger, something that required a strong heart, a mature faith, a transformed vision. The time of scarcity is over. I am the God of restitution, and what has been taken will be returned, multiplied. I saw doors being closed before you. I saw opportunities slipping away. I saw people walking away, leaving you in the middle of uncertainty. But understand this, some losses were deliverances. I needed to remove what was not part of your future. What seemed like a delay was actually protection. Now I'm opening paths you didn't imagine. I'm restoring areas that look dry and putting it in your hands, something that no one can steal. Some people doubted you. They said you would never make it this far, that their faith was foolish. That team, their prayers were useless, but I always knew what I was doing. And now your victory will not just be yours, it will be a living testimony. You won't need to prove anything with words, because what I'm putting in your hands will speak for itself. The same ones who doubted will see that my promise never fails. The enemy tried to discourage you in the process. He used voices, circumstances, and even your own thoughts to try to stop you. But look at where you are now. You resisted, remained firm, believed when everything said otherwise. And why do you persevere? Oh, now you will see the result of your faith. The barren land turned into fertile soil. The time of mourning and waiting is over. Harvest time has arrived. Share this word with someone who needs to hear it right now. Just as God is restoring your life, He wants to reach those who also need this promise. The time for restitution has arrived, and this victory is already in your hands. The enemy tried to prevent, tried to block, tried to cast doubt, but God's promise about His life was sealed from the beginning. Before the battle even began, His victory had already been declared. Every difficult situation, every spiritual struggle, every contrary word that came up to make you give up had no power to cancel what God determined. There were times when it seemed like everything was against you. You saw doors closing before your eyes. You faced betrayals from people you trusted. You dealt with difficulties that tried to make you back down. You prayed, and sometimes you didn't see immediate answers. The enemy whispered lies to your heart, telling you that nothing would change, that you were alone, that your faith was in vain. But God was seeing every detail. He allowed some losses, some difficulties, not to destroy you, but to strengthen you. The battle was intense, but God's protection never failed. The enemy tried to use the people around you to weaken you, tried to plant fear, tried to distort circumstances to make you doubt. But his faith prevailed. Even without understanding, you remained believing. Even without seeing a way out, you continued to trust. Now God is showing that what He planned was always on the way. Harvest time has arrived. How many times have you felt like you were alone on this journey? How many times did you think no one saw your struggle? But I saw it. I saw you face challenges that no one imagined. I saw when you held back tears to appear strong. I saw when you had to get up, even though you had no strength. The enemy thought that you would not resist, that you would not be able to bear the weight of the difficulties. But he was wrong, because what was inside you was greater than any opposition. Your faith has been tested, yes. You faced storms that could have knocked you down. You faced doors that closed without explanation. You saw people leaving when you needed them most. But every situation that seemed like a blow against you was, in fact, a stepping stone to take you even higher. God did not allow anything to destroy you because He had already decreed that this day would come. And that day arrived. The time of crying, waiting, and uncertainty is behind us. The enemy tried to make you believe that nothing would change, but he is a liar. The truth is that God never lost control. He never left you alone. He saw every moment you chose to continue, even when everything said to give up. He saw her resistance, her perseverance, and now He's putting it in your hands, what no one can steal. What God gives you is definitive. It does not depend on circumstances. It cannot be cancelled by anyone's opinion. What was written in the heavens about your life is now materializing before you. There is no opposing force capable of stopping the movement of God. If He promised, He fulfills it. The harvest that arrives now is the result of your faith, your persistence, and your heart aligned with His will. The voices that used to try to discourage you will now see what God has done. Those who doubted will see the fulfillment of the promise with their own eyes, and when they ask how it was possible, your answer will be simple. It was God. Don't worry about what happened anymore. What was held back is now being released. What seemed impossible now becomes reality. You don't need to fear the future, because it has already been written by the hands of the one who never fails. Right. Victory is mine by the power of God. In the comments, declare with faith that nothing can steal what has already been determined for your life. The time for waiting is over. The promise was fulfilled. Now is harvest time. Not everyone will celebrate your victory. Not everyone will understand what God is doing in your life. Some people were by your side while you waited, but when the promise arrived, their hearts were filled with questions and even envy. That doesn't mean you don't deserve what you're getting. It doesn't mean you did something wrong. It just means that not everyone can handle the move of God in someone's life. When God begins to exalt, to bless, to fulfill promises, eyes turn to you. There are those who rejoice, those who are strengthened by their testimony, but there are also those who question, those who judge, those who hope to find flaws to belittle what you received. And that's why God doesn't just deliver blessings, He also teaches how to protect them. There are promises that were not made to be shared with anyone. Not everyone has an aligned heart to understand what God does. Have you ever noticed that along your walk, some people walked away without explanation? Have you noticed that some who claimed to be by your side disappeared the moment your answer arrived? This was not a mistake. This was God allowing you to see who was truly walking with you out of love and who was just there out of interest or convenience. Excessive exposure can be dangerous. God knows the right time to reveal certain things. Sharing everything too soon can open up space for unnecessary attacks. What God gives you is to be multiplied, not to be placed in front of the wrong eyes. Some blessings are like seeds that need to be cultivated before they are shown to the world. Not all fruit is born ready to be harvested. God has always taught about the importance of prudence. He showed that there are times to speak and times to remain silent. There are moments to witness and moments to keep in the heart. What He is doing in your life right now is not small. It's something great, something that will reach many people, but everything has its time. And the time to share needs to be directed by Him. Its history cannot be erased. What God has done, no one can steal. But it takes wisdom to discern who is around you, to know with whom to share your dreams, your achievements, your plans. Many of the battles you faced were caused by people who knew too much about your journey. The enemy does not always attack directly. He often uses information that has been exposed unnecessarily. This does not mean that you should live in fear, distrusting everyone. It just means God wants you to be strategically wise. May you keep what is precious until He Himself says that the time has come to make it visible. There are battles that are won in silence. There are miracles that happen away from the spotlight. And there are victories that will only be understood by those who have a heart turned towards God. What God has placed in your hands is a treasure. Don't give this treasure to those who don't know how to value it. Do not expose what is still being shaped. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. What is yours has already been decreed in the heavens, and at the right time, it will be seen by everyone. The promise that God fulfills in your life will be undeniable, but the way you protect that promise shows how much you have learned from Him. What God delivers needs to be taken care of. The blessing that has come to you has not only come to be received, but to be multiplied. God does not deliver promises to be wasted or forgotten. He trusts in the hands of those who know how to value, those who understand that everything that comes from Him has a greater purpose. Now that you are experiencing the fulfillment of the promise, it is time to manage it wisely. Many people receive something from God and, due to lack of care, miss the opportunity to see this blessing grow. Some waste their harvest because they have not learned to sow correctly, but you didn't come this far to let go of what God has placed in your hands. This blessing is not just a gift, it is a key for new cycles, new opportunities, new transformations. How you take care of it will define what will happen in your life. Multiplication begins at gratitude. Those who value what they receive see more being added. Whoever recognizes that everything comes from God experiences a continuous flow of His presence. But those who ignore or trivialize the promise often find themselves stuck in stagnation. God honors those who are faithful in little so that they may be placed over much. Have you ever noticed how some people live only in cycles of losses and beginnings? Many times it is not because God stopped acting, but because they did not know how to manage what He had already delivered. Blessing is not just about to receive, but also about to care. God delivers something so that you can grow, so that it becomes a living testimony and not just a passing moment. The promise that has arrived now is not just yours. God never releases something just for a single, individual purpose. What He is doing in your life has an impact far beyond what you can see. People will be reached by your testimony. Your home will be transformed. Your walk will be visible proof that God fulfills what He promises. And for that reason, He wants you to be a channel of blessing, someone who carries the reflection of His love and faithfulness. Nothing that comes from God is small. He doesn't give anything halfway. He doesn't deliver something to be forgotten. The promise He fulfilled needs to be honored, preserved, and used so that others may also be strengthened. The enemy will try to divert your attention. He will try to make you act impulsively, without discernment. But keep your eyes on the purpose, because what God began, He will complete. How you treat this blessing now will determine how much will be showered on you. If there is gratitude, there is growth. If there is fidelity, there is multiplication. God trusts more to those who are responsible with what He has already placed in their hands. Your harvest does not end here, but it depends on how you manage. What you have already received, don't leave without signing up. God still has a lot to talk to you about. Stay connected to what He is revealing. There are even more promises being released, and He wants you to be ready to receive them. What God has done in your life cannot be hidden. Your journey so far has been marked by challenges, pain, and moments when everything seemed impossible. But now, your story becomes a living testimony to the power of God. What was once a silent struggle will now be a beacon for those still in the midst of the storm. Many will see the transformation God has wrought in you and find strength to continue their own battles. Every difficult phase you faced had a purpose. It wasn't in vain. What felt like defeat was actually preparing you for something much greater. Now when you look back, you can see that even the most painful moments were used to lead you to this moment. God never wastes a fight. He transforms each scar into a mark of overcoming, each tear into a testimony, each loss into a new beginning. Your story is not just about you. God is using every detail of your journey to impact other lives. People who are now facing what you have already overcome will look at your journey and find hope. Many who thought about giving up will be strengthened by seeing that you won. Your victory is not just an end, but the beginning of something much bigger. Those who didn't believe will see. Whoever doubted will testify. Whoever scoffs will realize that God never abandons those who trust in Him. The time of your exaltation has come, not for your glory, but for the name of God to be magnified through your life. What He did will be impossible to ignore. You no longer have to worry about proving anything to anyone. Your answer will be what God is doing in your life. Those who previously questioned their faith will see the Lord's actions with their own eyes. Your testimony will be a reflection of God's faithful character, irrefutable proof that His promises do not fail. The enemy tried to make you believe that you would never get out of the situation you were in, that this fight would be the end of your story. But he failed. God rewrote his path, restored his strength, opened doors that seemed closed forever. Now his life becomes an inspiration to many who need to see that God is real, that he answers prayers, and that he never forgets his children. Every step you took in faith, even without seeing the path, now becomes a living testimony. Your journey will serve to lift up those who have fallen, to rekindle the faith of those who were weak, to prove that those who trust in God will never be disappointed. If this word touched your heart, like and share. Someone needs to hear this today. Your testimony has the power to reach those on the verge of giving up. What God has done in you is not just a personal miracle, it is a sign for many who are still waiting for their own answer. The promise that God is fulfilling in your life is not just for you. What He is doing now will extend beyond your personal journey and reach those around you. Many times you have prayed for your family, asked God to touch those you love, waited for changes that never seemed to come. But listen, the move of God has already begun. What He began in you will spread like a chain of transformation, reaching your home, your family, and even future generations. How many times have you seen people in your family moving away from God? How many times have you interceded for someone without seeing signs of change? God heard every prayer. He knows the struggles you've faced, the worries you've carried in silence, the requests you've made over the years. Now, what seemed distant begins to become reality. God is restoring bonds, healing hearts, bringing back those who lost their way. What is being released into your life is not limited to just you. God does not bless in half. He does not transform just a part. He does the complete work. Your family will not be the same after this time. Those who did not believe before will see with their own eyes that God is real, that He answers prayers, that He changes destinies. Your testimony will be a beacon of hope within your own home. Maybe you thought that some in your family would never turn to God, that some changes were impossible, but nothing is beyond His reach. The same God who sustained you, who restored you, who fulfilled promises in your life, now begins to act on those who are close to you. You may not yet see everything happening at the moment, but in the spiritual world, the transformation has already begun. God is breaking chains that have tied your family for generations. It is breaking cycles of pain, removing negative influences, bringing liberation to those who need it. He is rebuilding what seemed destroyed, bringing healing to frayed relationships, bringing unity to those who were once divided. He is answering prayers that you no longer even knew how to ask. The impact of what God is doing now will be felt for a long time. Your generations will carry the reflection of what God began in you. Your children, your grandchildren, those who will come after you will have a legacy of faith because God chose this moment to change the history of your home. Your role now is to remain firm, continue to believe, continue to be a light within your own family. You will be the instrument that God uses to bring even more transformation. Your life will be living proof that God not only blesses, but saves, frees, and restores. If you believe this, write in the comments, "My family will be reached." Proclaim this with faith, because God is moving the waters inside your house. The response has already begun, and no one can stop what He is doing. The miracle you received is not the final destination, but the beginning of something even greater. Many people wait anxiously for God's answer, but when they finally receive it, they stop seeking His presence. But listen carefully. The greatest reward is not the miracle, it is the God who sent it. What He has done in your life is great, but the relationship you build with Him during this process is worth much more than any material blessing. Have you ever noticed that during the time of waiting, you prayed more? sought more, and grew closer to God, the difficulty made you dive deeper into His presence. But now that the answer has arrived, you need to understand that the true gift is not just what was delivered into your hands, but what happened inside your heart. Many people receive the promise and, over time, move away from the one who gave it. But God wants you to stay close. He doesn't just want to be the God who blesses you, He wants to be the God who walks with you every day. Don't allow the brightness of the blessing to overshadow the brightness of His presence in your life. What He did is extraordinary, but nothing compares to the privilege of having true communion with Him. A miracle can transform a moment in your life, but the presence of God transforms your whole life. Those who seek only blessings may receive them and then feel empty again. But those who seek God find a purpose that goes beyond their circumstances. They find a peace that does not depend on what is around them. God wants you enjoy the promise, but without losing focus on the blesser. What would have happened to Moses if he had agreed to enter the promised land without the presence of God? What would have become of David if he had just been content to be king, but had not kept his heart connected to the Lord? The greatest achievement of all these men was not the land they received, the position they held, or the victories they had. It was the intimacy they maintained with God throughout the journey, and now He is calling you to something even greater. You asked for the blessing, but God wants to give you more than that. He wants to give you direction, wisdom, peace that cannot be shaken. He wants you to live not just a miracle, but a life transformed by His presence. What you receive today is confirmation that God cares for you. But don't stop here. There is much more to be experienced in His presence. The enemy will always try to distract those who have received the promise. He will try to take away the focus, plant accommodation, make the search lessen. But God is calling you to a deeper level. He wants you to keep seeking, keep growing, keep allowing your life to be a living testimony of His power. The next word could be exactly the answer you've been waiting for. Share now. Someone needs to hear this today. God has more for you, and He wants you to remain steadfast in your walk with Him. What God did was not the end, but the beginning of something even greater. The promise fulfilled today is just part of the plan He has for your life. You can look back and realize that every step of this journey had a purpose. Every moment of waiting was necessary. Every challenge shaped your faith. But now, God wants you to understand that the path does not end here. There is more to be experienced. There is more to be discovered. There are new promises that He still wants to reveal. The time of waiting taught you to trust. Harvest time showed that God is faithful. But now comes the time of deepening, where He invites you to walk even closer. To Him, the presence of God is not a destination that can be reached once, but a place that can be inhabited every day. And that is what He wants for you. That your heart remains aligned with His will. That your faith continues to grow. That your life is a reflection of the greatness of His love. Have you ever noticed that the journey with God is never linear? There are always new promises, new challenges, new answers. Every victory paves the way for greater growth. Every blessing you receive is a reminder that He always has more. When God keeps a promise, He not only delivers what was asked for, but also opens doors to something even greater. What seemed impossible became reality. What was once just a desire in your heart is now in your hands. But that doesn't mean the journey is over. God always takes His children to new levels. If He brought you this far, He will continue to guide you. You have not reached the end, but the beginning of a new phase where your faith will be even more strengthened, where new purposes will be revealed, where you will experience a new outpouring of His presence. How many times did you think you couldn't get here? How many times have you doubted whether the promise would really be fulfilled? But God proved once again that He is faithful. And just as this answer arrived, others will come. You will see that every wait is worth it, because God is never late, never forgets, never fails. The cycle of faith never ends, because God is always working. What He has done today is just a glimpse of what is yet to come. You don't need to fear the future, because He is already there, preparing the way, aligning the details, ensuring that everything happens at the right time. And now you find yourself facing a new beginning. Just as this moment has arrived, new moments will come. Every word that God has released upon your life will be fulfilled. Every plan of His will be manifested at the perfect time. Your trust in Him has brought you this far, and it will be this same trust that will take you forward. Take a deep breath. This is just the beginning of something extraordinary. The time you've been anticipating has finally come. You experienced the burden of waiting, the uncertainty that consumed your mind, and the anxiety that it had all been for nothing. However, the promise is now being fulfilled in front of you. Your arrival here was no accident. We witnessed every stride, every tear, and every solitary prayer. Because the person who made the promise is dependable in keeping it, the period of uncertainty is past. You repeatedly searched for clues and tried to determine whether there was still hope. There were nights when discouragement attempted to destroy all of your beliefs, but there were other days when your heart was full with faith. But pay close attention. I've been here all along. Throughout your life, I continued to work behind the scenes. I was moving invisible bits even when everything appeared to be motionless. I had complete control over everything. The waiting period served as preparation rather than punishment. In order for you to be prepared to greet that day, I had to fortify your faith, mold your character, and pave the way. And that day came. Don't hesitate to take a step forward. Don't be scared to do so. You now have what you so desperately sought. The adversary attempted to convince you that promises were just rhetoric and that nothing would change. However, I am God, and I deliver when I speak. I am neither a guy to make false promises, nor a son of man to break them. I have already begun to carry out the things I promised to do in your life. Heaven kept a record of every silent cry in the middle of the night and every secret tear that dropped. Nothing was overlooked. What appeared far away is suddenly coming to life in front of your eyes. People who don't believe still exist. Some others questioned you, claimed you wouldn't succeed, and claimed it was all a dream. However, my vision surpasses that of human eyes. I am aware of your devotion, your heart, and the sincerity of your faith. You don't have to convince anyone of anything. I'm going to put your answer in your hands right now. His triumph will be witnessed by the same people who questioned him and anticipated his downfall. But before you take responsibility for what I've given you, realize that this pledge is about more than just you. It has a far higher purpose. There is no time limit on what I am letting into your life. It will leave an impression on future generations. You can't even begin to understand the consequences of this. Thus, remember this word, because it marks the start of something very remarkable. Comment: I think God is fulfilling His promise as a demonstration of faith. You can attest from your own life that anyone who has faith in God will never be let down. The promise's time has come. Now is the moment to accept it. It was never a pointless wait. Perhaps with some skepticism, you looked back and believed that the seeming delay was really a result of bad luck. However, every event that transpired, every barrier you encountered, every door that was shut, and every setback you went through was a part of the divine preparation process. God wasn't sitting around doing nothing during this time. He was working in the background to get you ready to fulfill the promise when the time was right. You must have been exhausted many times and considered giving up. But I witnessed every cry, every prayer, and every silent surrender. I was forming your faith, but you questioned whether it was conceivable and whether this day would ever arrive. I was organizing the specifics, clearing the way of those who shouldn't be in your way, and shutting doors that weren't for you. I foresee the future, and my promise will always surpass your narrow vision. Therefore, if anything was withheld, it was to keep you safe. There were moments when you felt isolated and as though your strength was running out. Remember that I made you stronger during this waiting process when you were feeling weak and at your limit. You were creating something in yourself that could never be destroyed with each day that you stayed steadfast, even if you didn't see the results right away. The procedure made the land ready for the miracle, and now it is ready for the harvest. You have frequently questioned why you are going through all of this pain, but now you realize that every hardship was necessary for the experience you are about to enjoy. You wouldn't be ready for the extent of the blessing I am bestowing upon you right now if the procedure didn't exist. Every hardship, every sacrifice, and every act of faith have brought you to this point. God keeps His word and doesn't make hollow promises. He saw all you went through, every challenge you encountered, and every prayer you prayed. I witnessed your agonizing evenings, your efforts, and your unwavering faith. And what appeared to be impossible will now, right now, become a reality. Do not be misled, though. What you will go through is not unique to you. The aim of this benediction is far more extensive than you may think. What God is pouring into your life is not for your personal use, but rather for you to become a conduit for blessings, so that others are encouraged and strengthened by your tale of faith and triumph. For everyone around you, your winning testimony will serve as a ray of hope. As a result, remember that God's plan is always bigger than what our finite sight can perceive. As you reflect on your life, you may come to the realization that you had to wait to comprehend God's work. Looking back, however, you will see that everything was a part of the divine design. The wait was not an error or a waste of time. A fantastic moment was anticipated during the wait, and it has already come. Enjoy it now as an act of faith if this word resonated with you. Prove to the world that you think God was planning something great for your life despite all of your hardships. The promise is now yours, and the waiting period has transformed into a harvest period. They're restoring what seems lost. As you reflected on your life, you believed that certain opportunities had ended and that others would never come again. But pay close attention. Nothing has been lost. They were getting everything ready. The promises God made were never forgotten. Every solitary prayer, every agonized cry, and every agonizing night were all documented in paradise. The promise is now being released upon your life as harvest season arrives. You repeatedly questioned if it was worthwhile to keep believing. What appeared to be a no was actually a hope when God remained silent. Because of the size of what He had for you, it was impossible to offer. The waiting period was a necessary part of building, not punishment. Something was being built inside of you by God. You might not have been prepared to accept the promise if it had arrived earlier. However, you are now. Now, before your eyes, what appeared far away becomes real. Do you have any memories of the times you wept in private? From the times when you were unable to continue because of an unseen burden in your heart? I was present. I witnessed every painful moment, every unacknowledged sacrifice, and every unnoticed renunciation. I was getting ready for something more significant, something that called for a mature faith, a strong heart, and a changed perspective. This marks the end of the scarcity period. What has been taken will be given back in full because I am the God of restitution. Before you, I witnessed doors being closed. I watched as opportunities passed me by. I witnessed people departing, leaving you in a state of uncertainty. However, keep in mind that some losses were deliverances. What wasn't a part of your future had to go. In reality, what appeared to be a delay was protection. I'm now opening doors you never thought possible. I'm giving you something that one can take and repairing parts that appeared dried. You were questioned by some. You would never get this far, they asserted. That their prayers were in vain, that their faith was stupid. However, I was always aware of my actions, and now your triumph will serve as a live testament in addition to being your own. What I'm giving you will speak for itself, so you won't need to use words to prove anything. The same people who had doubts will see that I always keep my word. In the process, the enemy attempted to demoralize you. He tried to stop you by using voices, situations, and even your own thoughts. But now take a look at where you are. Despite all evidence to the contrary, you persisted, held fast, and had faith. And why have you persisted when you shall now witness the fruits of your faith? Fertile soil replaced the arid land. The waiting and grieving period is ended. It's harvest season. Someone needs to hear this word right now, so spread the word. God wants to reach individuals who also need this promise, just as He is mending your life. You already have this triumph, and the moment for reparations has come. God's promise for His life was sealed from the start, despite the enemy's attempts to stop, block, and raise doubts. His victory was announced even before the conflict started. Every challenging circumstance, spiritual challenge, and opposing statement that tried to convince you to give up had no ability to change what God had decided. Occasionally, it felt like everything was against you. You witnessed doors close in front of you, experienced betrayals from people you trusted, and overcame obstacles that attempted to bring you to your knees. Sometimes you prayed, but you didn't always see results right away. The enemy lied to your heart, telling you that your faith was in vain, that nothing would change, and that you were alone. But every detail was visible to God. He permitted some setbacks and challenges, not to break you, but to make you stronger. Even though it was a fierce war, God's protection never wavered. The enemy attempted to instill dread in you, use the people around you to undermine you and manipulate events to cause you to doubt yourself. However, his faith won out. You continued to believe even if you didn't comprehend. You kept believing even though you couldn't see a way out. God is now demonstrating that His plan was always coming to pass. It's harvest season. Throughout this trip, how many times have you felt alone? How many times did you believe that no one was aware of your difficulties? However, I did see it. I witnessed you overcome obstacles no one could have predicted. I witnessed your attempt to look strong by suppressing your tears. I witnessed the moment you had to stand up despite your lack of strength. The opponent believed that you wouldn't be able to handle the challenges and wouldn't fight back. However, he was mistaken, because your inner strength outweighed every resistance. Yes, your trust has been put to the test. There were storms that might have destroyed you. You witnessed individuals departing when you most needed them, and you had to deal with doors that shut without warning. However, every circumstance that appeared to be a setback for you was actually a springboard to further success. God foretold that this day would arrive, therefore He did not permit anything to destroy you, and that day came. We are over the period of grieving, waiting, and uncertainty. The opponent is a liar who attempted to convince you that nothing would change. In actuality, God never lost command or abandoned you. Every time you choose to keep going when everything told you to quit up, He witnessed it. He witnessed her defiance and tenacity. He is now giving you something that no one can take. What God provides for you is final. It is independent of the situation and cannot be revoked by anyone's viewpoint. Your life's destiny, as written in the skies, is now coming to pass. God's movement cannot be halted by any opposing power. If He makes a promise, He keeps it. Your trust, your perseverance, and your heart, in line with His purpose, are what will bring about the harvest that is coming now. The voices that once attempted to dissuade you will now recognize God's accomplishment. Those who had doubts will witness firsthand how the promise was fulfilled, and your response to their question about how it was possible will be straightforward. God was responsible. Stop worrying about what occurred. This is the release of what was suppressed. What once seemed unattainable is now a reality. The future has already been written by the one who never fails, so you don't need to be afraid of it. Write, "By God's power I have won," in the remarks section. You can confidently declare that nothing can take away what has already been decided for your life. The waiting period is over. The pledge was kept. Harvest time is upon us. Your win won't be celebrated by everyone. God is working in your life in ways that not everyone will comprehend. While you waited, some people were by your side, but when the promise came, they were envious and full of questions. That does not imply that you are not deserving of what you are receiving. It does not imply that you acted improperly. It simply indicates that not everyone is able to cope with God's intervention in someone's life. People look to you when God starts to glorify, bless, and fulfill promises. Some people are happy, and their testimony gives them strength. However, there are other people that doubt, criticize, and look for faults to diminish what you were given. Because of this, God not only bestows blessings, but also imparts knowledge on how to keep them safe. Some pledges were not intended to be disclosed to anybody. Not everyone is in a position to comprehend what God accomplishes. Have you ever observed that some folks left without saying anything when you were out on a walk? Have you noticed how some people who said they were with you vanished as soon as you responded? This wasn't an error. This was God giving you the opportunity to discern who was genuinely walking along you out of love and who was merely there for convenience or curiosity. Too much exposure can be harmful. God knows when to make some things known. Giving away too much too quickly can make room for unwarranted assaults. Instead of being put in front of the wrong people, God provides you the ability to multiply. Certain blessings must be nurtured before they are revealed to the public, much like seeds. Not every fruit is ready to be picked at birth. God has always emphasized the value of caution. He demonstrated that there are appropriate moments to talk and when to keep quiet. Moments must be cherished and moments must be observed. He is now accomplishing something very significant in your life. Although it's fantastic and will be seen by many, everything has its time, and He must determine when it is appropriate to share. Its past cannot be undone, and no one can take away what God has accomplished. However, it takes discernment to determine who you are surrounded by and with whom to share your goals, accomplishments, and objectives. People who knew too much about your journey were responsible for many of the conflicts you encountered. The enemy does not always launch direct attacks. Instead, he frequently makes advantage of information that has been made public. This does not imply that you should distrust everyone and live in constant terror. It just indicates that God desires for you to have strategic wisdom. May you hold on to what is valuable until He Himself declares that the moment has come to reveal it. Silence is the key to winning some wars. There are miracles that take place in the background, and there are triumphs that only people with a heart oriented toward God will comprehend. It is a treasure that God has given you. Don't gift this treasure to someone who doesn't understand its worth. Keep what is still being formed hidden. You don't have to convince anyone of anything. The gods have already decided what is yours, and everyone will see it when the time is right. Unquestionably, God will fulfill His promise in your life, but how you handle that promise demonstrates how much you have learned from Him. We must take care of what God gives us. In addition to being received, the good that has come to you has been magnified. God doesn't make promises that will be squandered or forgotten. He puts His trust in those who know how to appreciate things and who realize that everything that comes from Him serves a higher good. It's time to handle the promise sensibly now that you are seeing it come true. Many people get a blessing from God, but they fail to take care of it, which prevents them from witnessing its growth. Some people don't know how to properly seed, thus they waste their harvest. However, you have come this far to hold on to what God has given you. This blessing is more than just a gift. It is a key to new opportunities, cycles, and changes. Your life's course will be determined by how you handle it. Thanksgiving is the first step toward multiplication. More is added for those who appreciate what they already have. Anyone who understands that everything originates with God feels His presence all the time. However, people who downplay or disregard the promise frequently end themselves in a state of inertia. Those who are faithful in small ways are rewarded by God, who elevates them above many. Have you ever observed how some people's lives consist solely of cycles of starts and losses? Often, it's not because God stopped working. Rather, it's because they were unable to handle what He had previously provided. Being blessed involves more than just receiving. It also involves caring. God gives you something so you can develop and make it a living testament rather than a fleeting experience. The now arrived promise is not solely yours. Nothing that God unleashes is ever done so for a single purpose. The significance of what He is doing in your life extends well beyond your immediate perception. You will reach people with your testimony. Your house will be changed. Your journey will serve as tangible evidence that God keeps His word. Because of this, He wants you to be a conduit for blessings, someone who embodies His constancy and love. Nothing from God is insignificant. He doesn't deliver something to be remembered or give something half-heartedly. It is necessary to uphold, preserve, and utilize the promise He fulfilled in order to strengthen others. The adversary will attempt to divert your focus and influence you to act without judgment and hastily, but don't lose sight of the goal. God will finish what He started. The amount of blessings you receive now will depend on how you handle them. Growth occurs when there is thankfulness. There is multiplication if there is integrity. God has greater faith in those who take responsibility for the things He has already entrusted to their care. The way you handle what you have already been given will determine how well your crop turns out. Don't go without registering. You still have a lot to discuss with God. Continue to be aware of what He is revealing. He wants you to be prepared to receive the additional promises that are being made. It is impossible to conceal what God has done in your life. Up until now, your road has been filled with hardships, suffering, and times when it seemed impossible. However, your narrative now serves as a living example of God's power. For those who are still in the middle of the storm, what was once a silent fight will now serve as a beacon. Many will be inspired to keep fighting their own battles after witnessing the change God has made in you. Every challenging stage you went through had a reason. It wasn't for nothing. In reality, what seemed like failure was setting you up for something far bigger. Looking back, you can see that even the most trying times helped you get to where you are now. God never loses a battle. He turns every defeat into a fresh start, every cry into a testimony, and every scar into a symbol of triumph. It's not only about you in your story. God is influencing other people's lives via every aspect of your experience. People will find hope in your story if they are now facing the same challenges that you have already conquered. The fact that you prevailed will encourage those who considered giving up. Your triumph marks the start of something far greater, rather than its conclusion. You'll see those who didn't believe. The person who had doubts will testify. Anyone who laughs will understand that God never deserts those who put their faith in Him. The time has come for you to be exalted, not for your own glory, but so that God's name may be exalted by your life. It will be impossible to overlook what He did. You don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. What God is doing in your life will be your response. The Lord's activities will be witnessed by many who previously doubted their faith. Your testimony will serve as an unquestionable demonstration of God's faithfulness and the fulfillment of His promises. The enemy attempted to convince you that you would never escape your predicament and that this battle would be the last chapter of your life. However, he was unsuccessful. God changed his course, gave him strength again, and unlocked doors that had seemed to be closed forever. His life now serves as an example for people who need to believe that God exists, hears their prayers, and never forgets them. Now, each step you took in faith, even if you couldn't see the way, becomes a living testament. Your path will serve to uplift those who have fallen, to restore faith to those who have lost it, and to demonstrate that people who put their trust in God will never be let down. Please share and like if this word resonated with you. This needs to be heard today. Those who are about to give up can be reached by your testimony. For many who are still awaiting their own response, what God has done in you is a sign, not just a personal miracle. God is keeping a promise in your life, and it's not just for you. What He is doing right now will affect those around you and go beyond your own journey. You have frequently prayed for your family, prayed for God to touch the people you care about, and waited for things that never seem to happen. But pay attention. God's work has already started. Like a chain of transformation, what He started in you will eventually reach your family, your home, and even future generations. How often have you witnessed members of your family turn away from God? How often have you prayed for someone and not noticed any improvement? Every prayer was heard by God. He is aware of the hardships you have endured, the anxieties you have kept to yourself, and the pleas you have made along the years. What seems far away now starts to come to pass. God is healing people's hearts, mending relationships, and bringing back those who have lost their way. It is not just you who is being freed into your life. God does not change only a portion, nor does He bless in half. He completes the entire task. After this period, your family will not be the same. Those who previously did not believe will witness firsthand that God exists, that He hears prayers, and that He alters people's fates. In your own house, your testimony will serve as a ray of hope. Perhaps you believed that certain changes were unachievable and that some members of your family would never convert to God. However, nothing is out of His grasp. The same God who kept you alive, healed you, and kept His promises in your life is now starting to work on your loved ones. The shift has already started in the spiritual realm, even though you may not be able to see everything that is going on right now. The bonds that have bound your family for generations are being broken by God. It is bringing emancipation to people in need, eliminating harmful influences, and ending painful cycles. He is restoring what appeared to be destroyed, mending broken relationships, and bringing people together who were before apart. Even prayers you no longer knew how to ask are being answered by Him. The effects of God's current actions will last for a very long period. The reflection of what God started in you will be passed down through your descendants. God selected this time to alter the history of your home, so your children, grandkids, and those who follow you will have a legacy of faith. Now it's your responsibility to stay strong, hold on to your faith, and continue to be a light in your own family. God will use you as His tool to accomplish much greater change. Your life will serve as a living example of how God not only bestows blessings, but also delivers, liberates, and heals. If you think so, leave a remark that reads, "My family will be reached." Declare this with confidence, since God is causing changes in your home. No one can stop what He is doing. The answer has already started. The miracle that you received is just the start of something even bigger, not the end. Many people eagerly await God's response, but after they have it, they cease seeking Him out. But pay close attention. The God who sent the miracle is the one who will benefit the most, not the miraculous itself. The relationship you have with Him during this process is far more valuable than any material blessing, even though what He has done in your life is wonderful. Have you ever found that you prayed more, sought more, and became closer to God while you were waiting? The challenge forced you to spend more time in His presence. Now that the solution has been found, however, you must realize that the real present is not simply what was placed in your hands, but rather what took place within your heart. After receiving the promise, many people eventually distance themselves from the person who made it. However, God desires that you be near Him. He wants to be the God who walks with you every day, not merely the God who bestows blessings. The light of His presence in your life should not be overshadowed by the blessing's brilliance. Although His actions are remarkable, nothing can match the honor of experiencing genuine communion with Him. While a miracle can change one aspect of your life, God's presence changes your entire existence. Those who solely look for blessings could get them and then feel depleted once more. However, people who seek God discover a meaning that transcends their situation and a serenity that is independent of their surroundings. God wants you to savor the promise while keeping your eyes on the blesser. If Moses had consented to enter the promised land without God's presence, what would have happened to him? What would have happened to David if he had not maintained his relationship with the Lord and had been happy to be king? The territory they were given, the position they occupied, or the triumphs they achieved were not the greatest accomplishments of all these men. It was the closeness they kept with God during the trip. He's calling you to something even bigger now. Although you requested the blessing, God has more in store for you. He desires to give you guidance, insight, and unshakable calm. He desires for your life to be changed by His presence, not merely a miracle. God's concern for you is confirmed by what you received today. Don't stop here, though. In His presence, much more can be experienced. The adversary will constantly attempt to divert those who have been promised. He will attempt to deflect attention, make accommodations, and decrease the search. God, however, is calling you to something more profound. He desires for you to continue searching, developing, and letting your life serve as a living example of His might. The answer you've been looking for might be there in the next word. Now share. This needs to be heard today. God wants you to stay firm in your relationship with Him because He has more for you. God's actions mark the start of something even bigger rather than its conclusion. His plan for your life includes the promise that was fulfilled today. Every step of this road had a purpose, every waiting period was required, and every obstacle molded your faith, as you can see when you look back. God, however, wants you to realize that the journey is far from over. He still has new promises that He wishes to make known, more to be found, and more to experience. You learn to trust during the waiting period. God's faithfulness was demonstrated during harvest season. However, He invites you to walk even closer to Him throughout this time of deepening. God's presence is a place that can be occupied daily rather than as a destination that can only be attained once. And that is what He desires for you, that your life reflects the magnitude of His love, that your faith keeps growing, and that your heart stays in line with His plan. Have you ever observed that there is never a straight line in the path with God? New challenges, new responses, and fresh promises are always emerging. Every benefit you receive serves as a reminder that He always has more, and every victory opens the door to even greater progress. In addition to providing what was requested, God opens doors to something much better when He fulfills His promises. What seems unattainable became a reality. You now possess what was merely a wish in your heart. However, the voyage is far from over. Every time God raises His kids to new heights, He will continue to lead you if He has already brought you this far. You have not reached the end, but rather the start of a new chapter in your life, one in which you will encounter a fresh outpouring of His presence, discover new purposes, and have your faith even more strengthened. How many times did you doubt your ability to arrive here? How often have you questioned whether the promise would actually be kept? However, God once again demonstrated His faithfulness, and there will be other answers as soon as this one. Because God is never late, forgetful, or unreliable, you will realize that every wait is worthwhile. Because God is constantly at work, the cycle of faith never ends. Today's actions are only a preview of what He has in store. He is already there, setting the path, coordinating the details, and making sure that everything occurs at the appropriate moment, so you don't need to be afraid of the future. You are now confronted with a fresh start. There will be more moments just like this one has arrived. Every word that God has spoken into your life will come to pass, and every plan He has for you will come to pass at the ideal moment. You have come this far because of your trust in Him, and you will continue to move forward because of this trust. Breathe deeply. This is only the start of something truly remarkable. Your waiting for moment has finally arrived. You carried the weight of waiting, the questions that tormented your mind, the anxiety that everything had been for nothing. But here before you is promise fulfilled. You arrived here, not at chance. One could see every stride, every tear, every silent prayer. The one who pledged is dedicated to fulfill it, hence the period of uncertainty is past. You searched for indications, trying to know whether there was still hope, gazing around so many times. There were days when your heart was full of faith, and days when discouragement sought to wipe out all you believed in. Still, listen closely. I have always been right here. I never stopped behind the scenes in your life working. I was manipulating things you could not see, even if everything appeared to be motionless. Not one object escaped my grasp. The waiting period was more of preparation than of punishment. I had to build your trust, mold your character, clear the correct roadways, so that when that day arrived, you would be ready to greet it. And that day came. Go ahead without thinking twice. You should not hesitate to advance. Now before you is what you sought for so much. The opposition aimed to convince you that promises were nothing more than words in the breeze, that nothing would change. But I deliver since I am God speaking. I am not a son of man to promise and fail, nor a man myself to lie. What I said would happen in your life already has begun. Heaven recorded every tear dropped in secret and every hushed scream in the middle of the night. Nothing went overlooked. What seems far off is suddenly materializing in front of you. Certain people still lack belief. Some others questioned you that you wouldn't make it, that it was all only an illusion. But I see differently than what the human eye can perceive. I understand your heart, your sincerity of faith, your commitment. You have no need of proving anything to anybody. What I am currently putting in your hands will be your response. Those who questioned, who anticipated to see his demise, will be witnesses of his triumph. But first of all, know one thing. This pledge is not only about you before you start to own what I'm providing. It serves much more broadly. I am unleashing something into your life that is not one moment. This will be something that defines generations. This affects more than just what you could possibly picture. Thus, remember this word in your heart, since the beginning of something remarkable is about here. Comment: I think God is fulfilling his promise as a matter of faith. Experience personally that whomever hopes in God will never be let down. The promise has come at last. Time for you to get it. There was never any waste of the waiting. You turned back, maybe unsure, believing that what appeared to be a delay was simply a mistake of fate. But every event, every challenge you encountered, every closed door and every setback you went through was a part of the divine process of getting ready. God was working behind the scenes, getting you ready to carry out the promise at the proper moment. He was not idly by all this period. You felt tired many times, maybe considered giving up, but I watched every tear, every prayer, every quiet surrender. You questioned if this day would ever arrive, but I was building your faith. I was organizing the specifics, eliminating those off your path, and shutting doors not meant for you. If anything was denied, it was to protect you. I know the future. Hence my promise will always be more than any limited vision you have. There were periods when you felt alone and as though your strength was running out. Remember that I made you stronger in this waiting process, even though you were at your limit and felt incapable. Every day you stayed strong, even without seeing the instant outcome, was developing something in you that cannot be undone. That field is now rich for the harvest. It was the means by which the miracle was ready. Though you have sometimes questioned the reason behind all this suffering, now you can understand that every effort was necessary for the moment you are about to live. You would not be ready for the scope of the blessing I am bestowing upon you now without the process. You have arrived at this point from every sacrifice, every hardship, every step of trust. God does not promise nothing. He satisfies what he declares. Him saw what you went through, every challenge overcome, every prayer. I watched your nights of suffering, your work, and your unwavering faith. And it is now, right here, that what seemed unattainable will materialize. But let me clear one point. What you go through is not only for you. The blessings have a far more use than you could ever see. God is releasing into your life, not for your own consumption, but rather for you to become a channel of blessing, so that your tale of conquering and faith inspires and fortifies others. For everyone around you, your victory's testimonial will be a lighthouse of hope. Thus, bear in your heart that God's aim is always more general than what our limited eyes allow. You could find in your life that you had to wait to know what God was doing. Looking back, though, you will see that everything was a part of the divine scheme. The waiting was not lost time. It was not a mistake. The waiting was getting ready for a fantastic event that has now arrived. Should this word really speak to you, savor it right now as a sign of faith. Show the world you think God was planning something remarkable for your life, even in your hardships. The promise is now yours. The waiting time has become a harvest period. What seems lost is presently under restoration. Looking over your life, You realized some paths had closed and some chances would never reopen. But pay great attention. Nothing has vanished. Everything was getting ready. God never missed what he promised. Heaven recorded every quiet prayer, every cry, in the middle of suffering, every night of sorrow. Harvest time has come now, and your life is being promised. You asked yourself a lot of times if it was worth carrying on believing. Though it was only a hope, God's silence seemed like a no. He had not small things for you, so it could not be given anyway. The waiting period was more of construction than of punishment. God was building within of you something. Should the promise arrive earlier, you might not have been prepared to welcome it. But today you are. What seems far now is reality before your eyes. Do you recall the evenings when your soul wrenched alone and no one else noticed? From the days you carried an invisible weight in your heart, devoid of the will to keep on, I arrived there. I watched every minute of suffering, every sacrifice you made without acknowledgement, every renunciation gone unseen. I was getting ready for something more, something that called for a matured faith, a strong heart, a changed vision. The period of shortage is past. I am the God of atonement. What taken will be doubled back. I watched doors close before your eyes. I watched opportunities vanish. I watched folks leaving you in the middle of doubt. Still understand this. Some losses were deliverances. I had to take out what your future did not call for. Actually, what looked to be a delay was protection. I'm now opening routes you never considered. I'm fixing dry-looking sections and handing them back to you, something nobody other could take. You were doubted by some people. You wouldn't make it far thus, they remarked. Their faith was naive, their prayers futile. I knew, though, exactly what I was doing, and now your triumph will be a living monument rather than only yours. What I'm handing you will speak for itself, so you won't have to prove anything using words. The same people that questioned will find that my pledge never breaks. Throughout the process, the opponent sought to deter you. To try to stop you, he employed voices, situations, even your own thoughts. But see where you are right now. You objected, stayed strong, thought differently, while all else said differently. And why are you tenacious today? You will see the outcome of your trust. The earth became rich from the emptiness. Mourning and waiting are no more times to spend. Harvest time now arrived. Tell someone who right now needs to hear this word. God wants to reach individuals who likewise require this promise, just as He is healing your life. The period for atonement has arrived. Already in your hands is this victory. Though God's promise regarding His life was sealed from the start, the enemy tried to prevent, tried to block, tried to cast doubt. His triumph had been announced even before the war started. Every challenging circumstance, every spiritual conflict, every opposite statement that tried to persuade you to quit up had no force to undo what God decided. Sometimes it looked as though everything was working against you. You watched doors close before your eyes, experienced betrayals from people you knew, and handled challenges meant to cause you to back off. You prayed, and occasionally you did not find quick responses. The enemy told your heart lies, that nothing would change, that you were alone, that your faith was useless. God, however, was seeing every element. He let certain losses, some challenges, not to break you, but rather to help you grow. Though the fighting was fierce, God's protection never failed. The enemy sought to sow doubt by means of distorted events, try to use the people around you to undermine you. Still, his faith was strong. You stayed believing even without knowing. You trusted even without looking for a way out. God is now demonstrating that his intended course of action was always exactly on track. Harvest times have arrived. How often have you felt as though you were traveling this road alone? You assumed that nobody witnessed your struggle how many times, but I noticed it. I witnessed your struggle with issues nobody else would have thought about. You held back tears to seem strong, and I noticed. I observed when you had to get up, despite lack of strength. The enemy believed you would not oppose or be able to carry the weight of the challenges. Still, he was mistaken, because what you were within outweighed all resistance. Indeed, your trust has been tried. You had storms that might have knocked you down. You watched people leave when you most needed them, and you confronted closed doors without explanation. Every circumstance that felt like a setback against you, however, was really a stepping stone toward even better success. God had already declared that this day would arrive. Hence, he forbade anything to ruin you. And that day finally showed up. We are behind us the times of tears, waiting, uncertainty. Though he lies, the opponent sought to convince you that nothing would change. Actually, God never lost control. He never left you alone either. He witnessed every instant you decided to keep going, even if everybody advised to give up. He sensed her resistance and tenacity. And right now, he is handing it to you what nobody else could have. God bestows upon you definite gifts. It cannot be negated by anyone's viewpoint. It is not dependent on circumstances. Now materializing before you was what was written in the heavens concerning your life. There is no opposing power able to stop God from moving. If he promised, he keeps his word. Your trust, tenacity, and heart in line with his will define the harvest that shows up now. The voices meant to try to deter you will now witness what God has done. Doubters will see the promise fulfilled right in front of them, and your response to their question on how it was feasible will be straightforward. God, forget about what happened now. What was withheld is now coming out. What was unattainable today comes to pass. You should not worry about the future, as the hands of the one who never fails have already written it. Right, thanks to God, victory is mine in the comments. Declare with trust that nothing can take away from what you have already decided upon for your life. The waiting period has passed. The promise was given true satisfaction. Harvest time is right here now. Not everyone will mark your success. Not everyone will get what God is doing in your life. While you waited, some were at your side. However, when the promise came, their hearts were full of questioning and even jealousy. That doesn't mean you don't deserve what you're getting. It indicates nothing about your wrongdoing. It simply means that everyone cannot manage God's arrival into their life. Eyes turn to you when God starts to glorify, bless, fulfill promises. Some people celebrate, some find strength in their testimony. There are also those who doubt, those who criticize, those who try to find defects to minimize what you got. God therefore teaches how to preserve blessings, not only delivers them. Promises exist that were not meant for public distribution. Nobody has a heart in line to comprehend what God accomplishes. Have you ever seen some persons walking away from your path without saying anything? Some people who claimed to be by your side vanished the instant your response came. There was no error in this. This was God letting you see who was really walking with you out of love and who was merely there for convenience or curiosity. One can find danger in too much exposure. God knows the proper moment to expose some things. Sharing everything too soon could create room for pointless assault. God sends you to be multiplied, not to be shown before the incorrect eyes. Certain blessings are like seeds that must be grown before they are revealed to the world. Not every fruit starts ready for consumption. God has constantly counseled on the need of moderation. He demonstrated that one has times to talk and times to stay silent. There are times to observe and times to treasure. It is not little what He is accomplishing in your life right now, though everything has its time. It's something fantastic and will appeal to a lot of people. And Him's direction will help to define the moment to share. There is no way to undo its history. What God has done cannot be taken by anybody. But it requires intelligence to recognize who is around you, to know with whom to share your aspirations, your successes, your plans. Many of the conflicts you encountered sprang from people who knew too much about your path. The enemy often employs knowledge that has been disclosed unintentionally. He does not always attack directly. This does not imply you should live in constant mistrusting of everyone. Simply said, God wants you to be strategically wise till He says the time has come to make it clear, keep what is precious. There are silent victories for some wars. Miracles occur away from the public view, and there are triumphs only known to those with a heart inclined towards God. God has handed to you a gem. Give this treasure to people that appreciate it not. Others, keep what is still in formation under secret. You have no need of proving anything to anybody. What is yours has already been decreased in the heavens and will be visible to everyone at the proper moment. Unquestionably, God promises something for your life, but your protection of that promise will reveal how much you have gained from Him. What God delivers has to be looked after. The gift that has arrived for you not only awaits acceptance, but also multiplies. God does not provide promises meant for waste or forgetfulness. He puts His faith in the hands of people who know how to value, and those who realize that everything that originates from Him has a more use. It is time to properly handle the promise now that you are seeing it fulfilled. Many people get something from God and neglect the chance to witness this blessing's flourish. Some waste their produce since they lack proper knowledge on planting. You did not come this far, though, to release what God has handed you. This present is a key for fresh cycles, fresh chances, fresh transformations, not only a gift. Your attitude to it will determine your course of life. Thank you starts the multiplication process. People that appreciate what they have notice more being added. Those who understand that everything originates from God will always be in constant flow of His presence. Those who dismiss or minimize the promise, however, usually end up in inertia. God respects individuals who are faithful in small ways so they may be placed over much. Have you ever seen some folks living just in cycles of losses and beginnings? Many times, it is not because God stopped functioning, but rather because they lacked knowledge of how to handle what He had already given. Blessing entails to care as much as it does about to be received. God provides things so you may flourish and turn into a living monument rather than only a moment past. Not only yours is the promise that has come now. God never delivers something meant just for one person. His actions in your life have effects much beyond what you might observe. Your testimony will get people reached. Your house is about to change. Your trip will be evidence that God keeps His word. And for this reason, He wants you to be a channel of blessings, someone carrying His love and loyalty. Nothing coming from God is little. He delivers nothing halfway, neither something to be forgotten. The promise He fulfilled must be respected, conserved, and applied such that others could also grow stronger. The enemy will try to deflect your focus and induce impetuous, without thinking behavior. Still, keep your eyes on the goal. Since God started, He will finish. Your treatment of this gift now will decide how much show-off you get. Should one be grateful, one grows. There is multiplication in case of integrity. God trusts more to those who treat what He has previously handed with responsibility. Your harvest depends on how you handle the already acquired resources. It does not stop here. Sign up before you depart. God still has plenty to say to you. Remain in close touch to what He is exposing. He wants you to be ready to get even more promises that are being issued. God has not hidden what He has done in your life. Challenges, suffering, and times when everything seemed impossible have defined your path thus far. But today, your narrative turns into a live evidence of God's might. Once a silent battle, what is today a lighthouse for others still riding the storm? Many will find strength to keep on their own struggles after seeing the change God has done in you. Every challenging stage you went through had a reason. It proved not in vain. Actually, what felt like loss was getting ready for something far bigger. Looking back now, you can see that this moment came from even the most trying events. God never squanders a battle. Every scar becomes a mark of overcoming. Every tear becomes evidence of triumph. Every loss becomes a fresh beginning. Your narrative transcends merely your life. God is influencing other people with every nuance of your path. Those currently experiencing what you have already overcome will look at your path and get hope, seeing that you will strengthen many who considered giving up. Your triumph marks the beginning of something far more significant than a passing event. Those without belief will see. Whoever questions will testify. Those who scoff will come to see that God never deserts those who believe in Him. The time of your exaltation comes not for your glory, but for the name of God to be magnified over your life. One cannot overlook what He done. You should stop stressing, proving anything to anyone. Your response will be what God is doing right now in your life. Those who have lately doubts about their faith will observe the Lord's actions with their own eyes. Your witness will be a mirror of God's sincere nature, indisputable evidence that His promises come true. The enemy aimed to convince you that your narrative would stop here, that you would never be able to escape the current circumstances. Still, he fell short. God corrected his course, rebuilt his strength, unlocked doors that appeared closed permanently. Now many people who must view God as real, that He responds to prayers, and that He never forgets His children find motivation in His life. Every step you took in faith, even without seeing the road, now becomes a live testament. Your path will help those who have fallen to be raised, revive the faith of those who are weak, prove that those who believe in God will never let disappointment break through. Should this word speak to you, like and share. Someone today has to hear this. Your story can reach those just about ready to give up. For many others still waiting for their own response, what God has done in you is more than just a personal miracle. Not only are God's promises fulfilling for you in your life, what He is doing now will reach people close to you and transcends your own path. Many times you have prayed for your family, implored God to touch people you love, bided your time for changes that never seemed to arrive. Still pay attention. God's movement is already under progress. What He started in you will reach your house, your family, even next generations, acting as a chain of transformation. In your family, how many times have you observed members leaving God? How many times have you intervened for someone devoid of change-oriented signals? Every prayer heard by God. He is aware of your challenges, the silent fears you have carried, the demands you have made over years. What seemed far off now starts to materialize. God is rebuilding relationships, healing hearts, guiding those lost their way back. Your life is not restricted in terms of what is being released into it only. God does not bless in half. He does not change just a part. He finishes all of the work. Your family will change over this period. Those who did not believe before will find personally that God is real, that He responds to prayers, that He alters destiny. Your story will be a lighthouse of hope right in your own house. Perhaps you believed that members in your family would never convert to God, that some changes were beyond of reach. Nothing, though, is outside His purview. The same God who kept you, restored you, fulfilled promises in your life, now starts to act on people near to you. Though in the spiritual world the change has already started, you could not yet see everything occurring right now. God is releasing the bonds holding your family captive for several generations. It is releasing those who need it from negative influences, therefore stopping cycles of suffering. He is reconstructing what seems to have been destroyed, restoring broken bonds and uniting people who were previously split. He is responding to prayers you never even knew how to pray. One will experience the effects of what God is doing today for a very long period. Your years will mirror what God started in you. God chose this time to alter the course of your house, hence your children, grandkids, those who will after you, will inherit faith. Your current job is to stay strong, keep believing, keep becoming a lighthouse inside your own family. You will be the tool God employs to bring even more change. Your life will be live evidence that God blesses, saves, frees, and restores. Should you find this accurate, note in the comments, "My relatives will be reached." Declare this with faith, since God is guiding the tides inside your house. The answer has started already. Nobody can stop what He is doing. The miracle you experienced marks the beginning of something even more wonderful, rather than the end point. Many individuals cease looking for God's presence when they at last get His answer, since they wait nervously for it. But pay close attention. The God who dispatched the miracle is the one who offers the best prize. Although He has done in your life is fantastic, the relationship you have with Him during this journey is much more valuable than any worldly gift. Have you ever observed that you prayed more, sought more, and got closer to God while waiting? The challenge lets you explore His presence more closely. Now that the solution has come, though, you must realize that the real gift is what transpired inside your heart, rather than what was handed to you. Many people promise and over time distance themselves from the person who offered it. God, though, wants you to remain near. He wants to be the God walking with you every day, not only the one blessed upon you. Allow the brightness of His presence in your life to eclipse the brightness of the blessings. Though nothing compares to the honor of really communing with Him, what He did is amazing. A miracle can change a turning point in your life. Yet God's presence changes your life overall. Those who simply seek blessings could get them and subsequently feel empty once more. Those who seek God, however, discover a peace free from depending on their surroundings and a purpose beyond their situation. God wants you to savor the promise without sacrificing attention to the blesser. If Moses had agreed to live in the promised land without God present, what would have happened? If David had only been happy to be king and had not maintained his heart linked to the Lord, what would have become of him? Not the territory they acquired, their position, or their successes. The greatest accomplishment of all these guys was not any one thing. It was the relationship they kept with God all along the road, and He is calling you now to something much more outstanding. Although God wishes to bless you more than that, you requested the blessings. He wants to provide you direction, insight, permanent peace. You should live not only a miracle, but also a life changed by His presence. What you got today proves God loves you. Still, stop here is not enough. His presence promises much more to be experienced. The enemy will always try to divert those who have promised something. He will strive to remove the emphasis, create accommodation, reduce the search scope. God, however, is calling you to a higher level. He wants you to keep searching, keep developing, keep letting your life be a living tribute to His might. The following word could be exactly the solution you have been hoping for. Share here immediately. Today, someone had to hear this. God wants you to stay steady on your road with Him. He has more for you. God did not finish, but rather started something even more magnificent. The promise kept today is only one component of His life's agenda for you. Looking back, you can see that every step of this road had a goal. Every waiting time was required. Every obstacle molded your trust. But today, God wants you to realize the road does not stop here. There is much to be discovered, more to be experienced, fresh promises He still wants to unveil. Waiting teaches you to have faith. Harvest time proved God to be reliable. Now comes the period of deepening, though, when He encourages you to stroll, even nearer to Him. God is a place one may live every day. He is not a destination one can reach once, and that is what He desires for you. Your heart stays in line with His will. Your faith keeps developing. Your life reflects the grandeur of His love. You have ever observed that the road with God is never straight? New promises, fresh problems, fresh responses abound here. Every success opens the path for more development. Each gift you get reminds you that He always has more. When God keeps a promise, He not only gives what was expected, but also creates access to something much better. What seemed unreachable became reality. Once only a need in your heart, you now own it. Still, that does not imply the trip ends. God constantly pushes His children into fresh heights. Should He bring you thus far, He will be your ongoing guide. You have not reached the end. Rather, you are beginning a new phase in which your faith will be much more reinforced, in which fresh purposes will be exposed, in which you will experience a fresh outpouring of His presence. You thought you couldn't get here how many times? You have questioned whether the promise would truly be kept how many times, but God once more confirmed His loyalty, and more will come just as this response arrived. Every wait is worth it, you will find, since God is never late, never forgets, never fails. God is continually working, hence the cycle of faith never finishes. His actions today only scratch the surface of what is still to come. He is already here, ready to shape the future, align the elements, guarantee that everything occurs at the appropriate moment, so you should not worry about it. And right now, you are starting a fresh chapter. New moments will arrive, exactly as this one has arrived. Every message God has sent upon your life will be accomplished, every plan of His will shown at the just moment. You have come far from your trust in Him. This will be the same trust that will propel you ahead. Inhale deeply.
Here, this is only the start of something quite remarkable.